Disclaimer: this show is not for the faint of heart or the easily offended. The views expressed here are that of the show hosts only, and not their wives, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, polygamous partners, employers, music artists, businesses, or anyone other than the Cognitive Disillusions podcasters. The explicit tag is there for a good reason. Please proceed with caution.
Every one of us will have to decide whether or not we want to keep this great republic or whether we're willing to sacrifice it and surrender it to tyranny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Cognitive Disillusions podcast, where we address the current issues of today with brash humor, skepticism, or aggression to invoke critical thinking in the masses. We take our tightly held beliefs, everyone's tightly held beliefs, mash them up with current events, politics, and religion, then throw them to the fires of skepticism. We magnify the so-called logic and then blow it all up. There is no green zone of safety for a lack of critical thinking. This is episode number 9. Your hosts today are Joel, John, and I'm Al, and we are your tormentors. Joel, John, how are you guys doing today?
Decent. How you, Al?
I'm doing well.
I'm apparently masochistic.
Yeah, you've been beating yourself off the past couple minutes.
Off? Can we use a different preposition? Please.
Beating yourself down. There you go. Sure, yeah.
Down, up, not off.
On? Beating yourself
and
on.
We've gone to the gutter already.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
You went there.
I don't know. With his comments about choking on smoke earlier today, I'm guessing maybe on is probably not the best.
Well, I can't help it.
I have anything to say about that.
Well, it's just that I get so distracted by all these beautiful women wearing all these clothes, I just can't even function. You know, all these nice things that they wear, it just makes me stupid, apparently. I can't even control myself. How's that for a segue?
So, Al,
not even 1 minute. Not even 1 minute in. Oh my God.
So Al posted a video on his wall a little while back. Al, you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, there's a video going around the YouTubes, the internets right now. Females are essentially being put in the limelight with what they wear. And school districts are pushing these ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous requirements for what females can wear because it distracts the males and essentially trying to save themselves from women's fashion somehow because they get sexually distracted while in class and it impacts their learning some magical way. So this young lady does a video where she uses these asserted standards for females' clothing, and she gets a couple of guys into a room and has them take a test and then takes off her coat, which would then violate the rules of the school, and has them take a similar math test, and it doesn't impact their learning at all. And the viewpoint that's being pushed is I don't want to say the word feminism because it has a negative connotation with some people. It impairs their ability to understand what the fuck is going on. But they're trying to push equality for women by the same male standards is what's going on, and the schools are fighting back, saying showing too much collarbone or showing too much thigh apparently impacts males, and that females should adapt so that males can learn better as opposed to letting women express themselves and having the men fucking realize that women are human too. And that's the gist of this whole video. So does anybody have a take on it?
Where to begin?
I'll start. Sure.
Go for it, John.
So, from a mostly Christian worldview, I will say that I am all for protecting children, and I'm all for a conservative outlook on things. With that said, some of this shit's just going too far, man. I mean, collarbones, really? Shoulders? Come on. When you're talking about teen boys, I mean, you're talking about fellas that are coming into their own, they're exploring their own sexuality, and the girls too. So there's a very fine line, in my opinion, between girls dressing provocatively and girls dressing provocatively in order to distract boys. There's some intent going on here that you really have to feel out in order to, no pun intended, in order to figure out exactly what's going on. Merely showing a collarbone or a shoulder is not, I mean, that there should not be a dress code about that. I mean, that's just silly. But when it comes to certain things, I mean, miniskirts have been around since the 50s. They've been popular since the 70s, 80s. They're still going strong, but wear something underneath them. I mean, if you're walking around, if you're a teenager at school, walking around trying to provoke things, there's got to be a line drawn. But when it comes to making rules about how much shoulder you can show, I always thought when I was growing up that the thing where if you make a girl get on her knees and her skirt touches the ground, then it's the right length. I mean, I always thought that was silly. That's almost degrading. Make a girl get on her knees in front of you in the hallway. What the fuck is that all about? The real question that I ask myself is this really about the teen boys, or is this about the educators? Is this the educators putting their sexual frustrations on these kids?
Well, let's flesh this out a little bit. No pun intended. Well, what we maybe could do is and get into your niche, John. Wow, that was hard to say. History shows all the way back, even to today, that men have taken extreme measures to try and control and often succeeding women's sexuality and by extension their liberty and that's something that has we've seen in many cultures to different extents, even today. I mean, just some obvious ones kind of come to mind in some of the Islamic cultures, but that's certainly not the only place that we see this. I mean, we're seeing it today in some of the more conservative areas of the country. So that's what we need to maybe as I say, flesh out is what really is driving this. It's certainly not this straw man, which I certainly think it is, of boys not being able to handle that. That needs to be addressed through education, not through prohibition. Prohibition doesn't teach people things. Education does.
I think that's completely disrespectful to males if you think about it. Basically, what it's saying is you're too much of a fucking Neanderthal to be able to handle yourself around a woman who's dressed, quote unquote, provocatively. Fuck that. That's just disrespectful to males in general.
Historically, the reason men have protected their women, again, this is historically, the reason has been to protect a bloodline. Okay, if you're in a property-centered culture, and you want to make sure that your property stays in your family, let's say, for example, a feudal landowner wants to make sure that his children, his rightful heirs, are receiving his property. He wants to make sure that his wife isn't sleeping around. I mean, we live in America in the 2000s, okay? We don't care about, well, I mean, in general, we do care, but look at the TV. I mean, the TV glorifies things like having an affair. We don't think that way. Our culture isn't about protecting a bloodline. Our culture is about integrity. So when it comes down to it, protecting your women is less important to us than it is to one of those either feudal or nomadic tribal cultures. For example, most Muslims.
Well,
They're still
even
going to
in,
care about protecting those bloodlines.
and
But again, that's historically. And it's not our culture. We're talking about our culture. So
and
we're not
Joel hit
talking
it.
about protecting women here. We're talking about protecting honor. We're talking about integrity.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. I would say Joel hit it on the head when he said the more conservative parts of our country, even though this happened in not so conservative an area, such as Seattle is one of the school districts that has some ridiculous dress codes. But it does come from a very excessively conservative viewpoint that, women should be submissive. Women should be, subservient to, as opposed to independent of, which is what
and ultimately
I think
control.
all three of us come from.
And ultimately, I don't buy the argument that it's about protection. Now, I certainly think that's a way of justifying it to some people, and part of me maybe can see how that may even have some merit in a vacuum, but it really is. It seems clear to me, anyways, that it is about control. It's about the thing that we've, throughout history always tried to do, which is control as many aspects of our environment as we can. And I think we can all attest to the power of a woman's sexuality over any man, or, well, not any man, I suppose, but
I think gay men would argue that pretty successfully against that.
That was one of my caveats, I suppose. But obviously, it is a powerful thing. Would you guys disagree with that? A woman's sexuality is a powerful thing in our lives as, I suppose, heterosexual males?
I would not disagree with that, but remember, that's not really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is we're talking about an educational institution enacting rules in order to teach children proper social behavior. And in our opinion, it seems, going about it the wrong way, going too far.
I would say going too far and going about it the wrong way. Part of it is because they're addressing the lowest common denominator in their group,
Yes.
which I understand legally is their best option. When it comes to lawsuits and all that, they're going for the most conservative of conservative positions so that they don't offend the taxpayer, so they get reemployed later, blah, 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 blah.
So instead, they're offending the left wing who wants more freedom.
Well, not even the left wing. I don't technically fall under the left wing, but I still see my daughter the same way I see my son in the rights and freedoms afforded to them as citizens of this country. Unfortunately, the very, very conservative side of things sees me as very, very left-leaning and very, very liberal when I go, my daughter should be able to express herself in the same way my son does. And my son is allowed pretty much free fucking reign when it comes to dress code.
So to the left
You know?
of the repressive 50s.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there is a double standard here, clear as day. I mean, you can't deny that.
We don't know that. The video did not talk about men's fashion. The video only talked about women's fashion. We don't know how they treat the guys.
My experience says there's a double standard. You're
for
right,
instance,
if we're going strictly by the video.
My children's school has a similar dress code to that even in the middle and high schools. My son is in middle school, my daughter's in intermediate, which is classes 3 through 5. But even their dress code says girls only can wear skirts. But the skirt has to be longer than knee length and only this time of the year. But it also says that girls can wear shorts, but it can only be this time of the year for this length of clothing. you don't see the restriction on boys wearing shorts for the time of the year. You do see the length that has to be below the knee, but you don't see the restriction on the time frame that you do with females.
Well, boy shorts in general are not designed the same way that hot pants are. Come on.
Well, even with, well, my daughter doesn't wear hot pants, but that's beside the point. You know, even if she's wearing shorts that are below knee length, that are denim shorts, she's not allowed to wear those certain periods of the year because she's female.
Oh, come on, Al. You and I have both seen physical education attire that very much resembles hot pants, and men were expected to wear them. Welcome to the Army.
Well, yes, that is very true. Our PT shorts were
a 1980s basketball player.
Yeah,
80s and prior.
Yeah,
I suppose even early 90s.
Let's go there for a minute. What if that came back into fashion? I mean, this is 2016. Things that happened in the 80s and 70s are coming back. What happens if men's hot pants come back? Do you think this school is going to find that to be unacceptable?
No, I can already tell you
I'm gonna pray for glaucoma. I'll tell you that much.
If men's fashions get short like women's have, for whatever reason, and men's junk starts hanging out like it did back in the 80s and 70s, you think that's going to affect their decision any? Do you think they're going to be happy that they enacted some of these rules now?
Look, there's definitely some solid points to having dress codes. I do agree with that. We are trying to mold our young people into young adults and further down, adults. So certainly that needs to be part of the process as far as discussing things that society generally finds appropriate to some extent. What I'm concerned about, hold on, let me finish out. Let me just get this out. What I'm concerned about is there seems to be a very clear double standard as it is right now. The shoulds and should we do this or should we do that is one thing, but we need to apply to the best of our ability these rules in a universal way. And that's what seems to not be happening.
Well, if skirts are forbidden for boys to wear, then honestly, there are certain rules that are only going to apply to women, period, end of discussion. Unless you allow boys to start wearing skirts, which, you know what, I'm okay with, but it ain't going to happen. Most boys aren't going to wear skirts. There might be a few.
I understand. I understand that boys and girls tend to wear different things.
Learning.
But what I'm saying is there's not this level of discussion with let's just throw out high school dudes that are all jacked in the gym and they're just wearing nothing but these tiny tank tops or something. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if this just got homoerotic on me on accident, but
you know what? I'd be okay with that too.
But we're not talking about that stuff. Right. That's not what we're obsessing over. That's not what these schools are obsessing over. Again, some kind of universality as far as attention goes to a dress code is appropriate. It seems extremely disproportionate, and it seems pretty easy to understand why that would be, considering history.
Let's look at Britney jeans. You don't see men's waistlines coming down in manufacturing. Okay, yeah, boys are wearing their pants down around their ankles, but the waist, the crotch to waist is manufactured in a particular fashion. It's long, it's big enough to cover you. But women's fashions, let's look at women's jeans. You got these Britney pants that have been going around for the last 20 years that are starting to get right around the 5 to 6 inch range, where you've got 6 inches of cloth between the waistband and the crotch. Okay, the shorter they get, the closer they get to the wahoo. Okay, where does that stop?
Did you just hold on? Did we just call it a wahoo?
I'm trying to keep this family oriented. Thank you very much. But
Fuck
anyway,
that.
The point that I'm trying to get at is that fashion is not going to stop. Fashion is going to go where it wants to go. And teen girls are going to want to stay in fashion. So as American fashions become more and more sexualized, teen girls are going to want to wear those clothes, whether they realize that they're sexualizing themselves or not.
Well,
Spanx is a good example.
I think we're going a little far out there. We don't even have to go to 6 inches of cloth for the jeans and this and that. I mean, you can just look at the hair dress codes, for crying out loud. Most of them say that boys can't have hair past their shoulders, but girls can have ponytails. What about dudes that want to have ponytails? There are a lot of guys, even in the middle school, that want to grow their hair out. And they can't have certain colors because it's distracting, and they can't wear this type of T-shirt because it might offend somebody, this, that, and the other. I understand the need to have an environment where learning is the primary key, but you also have to keep in mind that these kids are starting to express themselves, and that's part of their learning process. Same thing with, we're learning that gender identity is actually starting at a much younger age, where they're starting to identify whether they're male, female, in trans, and all that. And we're not allowing for that possibility by keeping these binaries. And by going, I'm sorry, but boy, I know you identify as a girl, but you can't wear a skirt. That's wrong. And that's where the problem is it's not only is it subjugating and is it containing females while allowing, quote unquote, the gender masculine stereotype to flourish without really any repression, but it's also affecting all these kids that are, somebody who wants to identify as a boy can't, and somebody who wants to identify as a girl can't because of this repression.
Is that a decision? Mind you, I'm calling it a decision. Is that a decision that child can make? Is that child educated enough about sexuality to be able to make that decision? It seems to me that's a decision that a human being should be making when they are an adult, is what kind of sexuality they want to have. Not gender. They're born with a gender. But what kind of sexuality they want to have, that seems to me that's a decision that an adult needs to be making.
No, you're thinking that a gender is basic biology, and gender is the gender identity that one holds.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but you're trying to make it a choice in the way you're wording it, and it's not a choice. I mean, same thing with, we had the same issue when it came to children who were homosexual without the sexual drive. Now we know that even as young as 5, somebody who has a homosexual brain chemistry has an attraction, even though it's not a sexual attraction, to the same gender at 5. We're able to identify that, and the child knows. The child knows. So the same thing with the gender identity. I don't feel right because I feel like X, Y, or Z, and I was born Q.
See,
you know what I mean?
This is exactly what I'm talking about. When you look at a fella in, let's say, a GQ magazine or on the news channel, whatever, you can recognize an attractive man versus an unattractive man. Okay, now take that ability to recognize whether or not somebody looks good and is the same gender as you. Take that and superimpose it into a child who has not had sex ed, who has not had human sexuality in a college classroom where they can talk about these things openly and make an educated decision about what kind of sexuality they want to have. What you've got instead is you've got the media, you've got TV shows, you've got everybody telling them you can act on these things before you are capable of making a decision. You should have the decision at whatever age you want. We don't give our children the option of drinking under the age of 21. They do it anyway, but legally they...
Whoa. Please tell me you did not just compare gender identity to fucking alcohol.
I'm comparing two things that we allow our children to expose themselves to. Legally.
John, we're not talking about leaving these kids high and dry to figure it all out for themselves. I'm not suggesting a paradigm. No, hold on. I'm not suggesting a paradigm where we just let them figure everything out. They need guidance for certain. But we also have to allow room in there. And you just see this pushback of what we have been going through with the media as far as sexuality goes, and where we're getting this pendulum effect once again, it seems at times, and we have to guide our kids but not push them into whatever it is we think they should be. And I think that's kind of the point that I think Al's making, but I am for certain, that we need to educate and talk and discuss these difficult things at younger ages, because they are happening whether we like it or not.
Absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't.
And neither are we.
Well, you just made the...
You're breaking up, Al.
Did we lose him?
I think we might have lost him.
I noticed. I keep trying to talk, but it keeps Hello?
Hey,
I keep trying to talk, but it keeps cutting me out.
You're mostly there, which is good.
Okay, so go back to the part where you start ripping into me.
Well,
okay.
I wasn't trying to rip into you. Part of the problem is that I think... Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
I think part of the problem is that there's a mindset that you have that doesn't comport to what we know now as a reality. And that's part of the communications barrier. I'm communicating from what we know now as gender identity versus sexuality. And you're seeing gender identity as gender role and sexuality at the same time, and they're completely different.
You're misunderstanding me. You're misunderstanding me completely. I'm not saying that gender identity and gender role are the same thing. What I'm saying is children are not educated enough to make a decision about their bodies. We don't allow children to have children. Whether they do it themselves is their thing. Okay,
no, but children
is a real problem. But
children are smart enough.
Go ahead. Children are smart enough.
Children are smart enough at age 5 to figure out whether or not they feel more like a girl or more like a boy by the gender binary or somewhere in between than we previously believed. And so
do you think it would be better if we removed gender identity completely from schools and went with, let's say, uniforms in public schools?
No. Because gender identity is part of the whole process of learning and development. They learn and grow with their understanding of how they view themselves.
There are no classes on it.
We view them.
You
don't need a class on it. You don't need a class. Did you need a class to tell you were heterosexual and a male? And you have viewpoints of a male?
I learned more in human sexuality classes in college than I ever learned in high school. If people were to give that kind of education at the high school or even at the junior high level, there's going to be a lot of blushing faces out there, but you know what? Those kids would have a better idea of what it means to be sexual in one fashion or another. It really makes no difference to me how they go about being sexual. It really makes no difference to me how they identify. What matters to me is that they can make an educated choice.
But you don't need... That's the frustration here. You keep tying it in your word usage and in your direction. You keep tying sexuality to gender identity, and they are not the same thing.
You're absolutely right. They're not. But those kids.
But that's what you keep communicating.
Okay, so
and
here's
there's
the thing.
a distinction between the two, and even children as young as 5 know that they are boy, even though they are born with female parts.
Okay, here's the thing. That boy who's born with male parts, who believes he's a female or has an affinity for female things, okay, that boy who gender identifies as a female, he can still make the choice later in his life to marry a woman and have children. That is a choice. I'm not talking about gender identity. I'm talking about education to make an educated choice about what kind of sexuality you want to have as an adult. Gender identity has nothing to do with it.
I've kind of stayed out of this for a little bit.
He's not listening to what I'm saying.
Well, hold on. Okay, so we're at a little bit of an impasse. Let me see if I can redirect a little bit and maybe get us back on course here. So, it sounds to me as though, regardless of this, qualm that you're having, Al, it sounds to me as though John is advocating for more comprehensive and thoughtful education in regard to sexuality, as far as not necessarily in helping somebody make the choice, but letting kids know and teaching them what's out there so that they can be thinking about these things. And we also can't discredit the notion that people go through different phases oftentimes. I mean, it's where we have the term tomboy and stuff like that.
Exactly.
A lot of people that are tomboys don't necessarily end up becoming, lesbian down the way, or trans, however they eventually identify. So I can't find any fault in the notion of really having more education about something that is so integral to every part of human existence as sexuality. I have no problem with that. Now, are you going to teach somebody to be a certain gender or identify as a certain gender? No, that's not the appropriate thing, but you should be giving them information so that they can be weighing these things out and seeing how they feel and being mindful about what's going on in their lives at a younger age, so that we're not having to stunt growth to the point where we do have people essentially sexually freaking out at a certain age through sheer ignorance of what all of this means, and truly understanding the consequences of the decisions that they make and just nature itself.
You just encapsulated my argument perfectly.
That baffles the hell out of me, because the word usage you used and the way you communicated, John, was nowhere fucking close to that.
Well, but we have to trust that what he's saying now is true, that I summed up what he was getting, and I felt like that's where he was trying to get from, if not lack for maybe certain terms, just randomly. So can we agree that if he agrees with how I've kind of just laid things out, that we can move on in that regard?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I also have the concern is that while you're educating, we're still repressing their growth by formulating dress codes that John at least articulated from my viewpoint, that it was okay to say you can't wear a dress, Tommy, because you identify as a girl.
Well, where's the line? So obviously the extreme of this continuum is going to school naked. Okay, so we can start there and say that's not okay for a number of reasons. So then we move up the continuum until we find a place that is more or less right, but still leaves some room for flexibility, right? I mean, that's important because not everybody is the same. And that's, that's what liberty is about. It's about responsibility. And those are the things that we need to be trying to, educate our children with is understanding that with your decisions, there are often consequences, good, bad, indifferent sometimes, but still consequences nonetheless. And those are the types of things that we need to be educating about. Dealing with even teaching people that are quote unquote normal. Is it cisgender or something like that? I'm not sure what the terminology is. Even instructing them on how to be good people to those people that are different than them. That in and of itself takes care of a lot of these issues, it seems like.
What we're talking about here is civility. Okay, what the schools are trying to teach is civil behavior, socially acceptable behavior. Okay, teen
Some
boys
schools.
and teen girls, mind you. Okay, some schools are trying to teach repression, but most schools, the paradigm in general is we're trying to teach socially acceptable behavior, civil behavior. Okay,
Well,
boys
take
and
a
girls
second.
are going to be undressing each other at that age, whether we want them to or not. We're talking about how easy are we going to allow them to make that process of undressing them in their heads?
Well, that's a separate
about
issue. I think that's a little bit more advanced on the steps of this process than we've gotten to at this point.
We're talking about dress code.
Yes and no. And here's where I see the distinction. If you have a dress code that says, okay, girls, you can wear dresses, but they have to be below knee length. In my opinion, there's an issue there. If they were to map it out and make it equal the way it should be, if you're going to wear a dress, it has to go this far below your knee. That's kosher, because now you've got room for the trans kids to wear that dress, but it's got to be below the knee. Okay, kosher. Now you've mapped the same dress code to everybody. If you're going to wear, long hair, it's got to be pulled back in a ponytail, whatever. Okay. That doesn't it doesn't have the gender binary that we're trying to create and trying to reinforce, because we don't have that same society anymore. We don't have the 1950s society that forces, this is what males look like, this is what females look like, there's nothing in between.
No, hang on a second, because males and females look different whether you want them to or not. We're not talking about how they look. We're talking about how they dress, which is a choice. We're not talking about biology. We are talking about choice.
I understand that, John.
We are talking about biology, though, on some level. I mean,
Yeah,
it's biology of the brain. I mean,
in the background, let me ask you this. A kid, whether he's trans or not, if he wants to get a job, let's say in corporate America, do you think that corporate America is ready for every kid out there who wants to be trans in his time off to represent the company looking like that? I don't think
they don't have a choice. Legally now, they do not have a choice. They either accept them or they get fucking sued.
That's actually quite untrue. Corporate America still retains the freedom to deny employment based on what they consider to be socially acceptable norms.
And now they get sued for it, and
they can't
lose,
be overt about it.
And there's plenty case law to support that.
Al, let's make a distinction here. There's the difference between someone overtly doing it, discriminating against someone, and then not overtly, I guess covertly.
This is very true, but after...
So there's practicality and there's legality, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's true, but after so many people, so many quote-unquote males that show up in dresses get turned away, then you've got an established pattern to go, all right, now you're just being a fucking douche.
Well, again, we're talking about business wear. We're talking about corporate America. We're not talking about what they do in their spare time.
Well, hold on. So not every kid is going to go into corporate America. We're not always preparing kids to deal with, to go into corporate America. We're letting them experiment and find out who they are. Hopefully kids will get an opportunity to be kids before they have to start worrying about what a CEO is going to think of them. I mean, I hope we give kids a little bit more of an opportunity to try and allow them to be able to make some mistakes and figure out what works in their life.
Okay, so now we need to come to a decision about what the education system is all about. In my opinion and in my experience, the public education system in America is designed to build a workforce, to build a society.
Well, that's a whole other debate, really.
So are they educating kids to express themselves, or are they educating kids how to enter the workforce and be a good member of society?
Well, let me tell you,
neither one of those is correct.
Yeah, well, let me talk about this. We one of the major things that needs to be guided and in some sense constructed is creativity. Okay, so you're not going to be a particularly creative person if everything that you're supposed to do is within this small little box of available options, like you're picking out a Honda Civic or something. If you want really creative, forward-thinking, thoughtful, progressive people, you need to allow a wide range of lifestyles and thoughts and brains and emotions and everything that goes into the human experience. If you want robots, then yeah, let's just do that. But that's not a very enriching.
That's what the public school system is designed to do, is to make automatons.
Okay. That's why I said it's a whole other debate, because I can't necessarily even disagree with that, or disagree with that fact, even while I'm disagreeing with the way it goes about doing that, and its basic statement of or its goal. So.
I mean, you're talking about creativity. You're talking about creativity. Creativity is not in the Common Core State Standards. Okay, it's not a part of the curriculum anymore.
Yeah, and that sucks, and that goes into all of this, really, on some level. Again, a whole separate debate that I'm nervous about biting off with, 8 minutes left or what have you. So maybe we should discuss a way or get an exit strategy here for this conversation.
Have we even come to any kind of conclusions about dress code at all?
Well, I don't know, Al. I mean, I don't think. I'm still trying to figure it out. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think we plotted for a shorter show with not. I don't think we're planning for as much dissent between all three of us as we have. Maybe I'm the only dissent here. I'm not really sure.
I'm still open-minded.
Don't get me wrong. I'm open-minded about this topic too, but there are lines to be drawn.
There are lines, but they certainly aren't solid, number 2 pencil lines.
No, absolutely not. They're really, really
Broad
wide highlighter lines, and you can see right through them. That's fine. But there need to be lines.
I agree. I just think all three of us are going to differ where that line should be.
I think
and that's what liberty is about. That's about that, and that's when, we really have to rely on the family system to do better.
And unfortunately, this is precisely why we have such a legalistic system, is because people like to cross lines. People like to push buttons. So girls who are allowed to wear tights to school, either for PE or in general, they're going to want to look like the girls on TV, so they're going to wear Spanx. They're going to wear the see-through kind, and that's crossing the line. I don't have a problem with tights, but I do have a problem with see-through tights. I've got a problem with somebody wearing nylons and nothing else.
So do I, especially if you've been at Walmart at 1 o'clock in the morning.
I was wondering if that was going to hit the shelves today.
Again, the collarbone thing, the shoulders, that's taking it way too far. But I mean, mini skirts, I don't have a problem with mini skirts. There's a place and a time for everything, and there's a place and a time for looking sexual. And school is not a place to look sexual.
Well, again, I think we are conflating sexuality with identity.
I agree with your statement, John, but I also agree with Joel's follow-up.
I can't say that I disagree with Joel's follow-up.
Usually, it's hard to do. See, I was beating myself up earlier on or off or whatever, and now I'm giving myself some props.
Hey, you know what? In the spirit of Joel-isms, I challenge you in this topic to figure out where you had the opportunity to call Al a racist.
How about right fucking now? Al's a racist.